Elias Hart stepped off the transport shuttle onto the soft, glowing surface of Cerulea, a planet that shimmered with blue-green light under its twin suns. The air smelled faintly sweet, like blooming flowers mixed with fresh rain. He adjusted the strap of his small satchel, which carried notebooks, translation devices, and a few small gifts for the alien diplomats he was about to meet. As a xenolinguist, he had traveled across dozens of worlds, yet every new planet brought a fresh wave of excitement and nervous energy. Cerulea, with its crystal forests and floating rivers, promised something entirely different. The shuttle bay was quiet, almost reverent. Cerulea's native species moved with a grace that seemed natural, their tall, elegant forms gliding over the glowing ground. Elias paused, taking in the sight of the inhabitants. Their skin glimmered faintly, reflecting the ambient light, and their large, expressive eyes seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. He reminded himself not to stare too long. Etiquette mattered here as much as anywhere else in the galaxy. He was led through the crystalline halls of the palace by a guide whose movements were precise and deliberate. The walls sparkled with embedded gemstones, each emitting soft colors, changing slowly as they reflected the twin suns outside. It was a place of beauty and serenity, yet Elias felt the weight of the expectations resting on him. He was not just a visitor. He represented humanity, a species still young on the galactic stage but often underestimated. He carried the hopes of proving that humans were more than their simple appearance, that their intelligence and empathy could rival even the most advanced alien civilizations. When he entered the grand chamber, he saw her immediately. Princess Liara stood at the far end, a vision of youthful energy and royal authority. She was 19, just on the cusp of adulthood by her species' standards, yet already commanding the respect of her people. Her skin shimmered with soft shades of blue and silver, and her hair floated as if weightless, reflecting the ambient lights in a gentle halo. Her eyes, large and bright, scanned the room with curiosity and intelligence. She was beautiful, but it was her confidence and sharp mind that made her unforgettable. "Dr. Hart," a voice called, polite but firm. He turned to see a ceremonial aide, gesturing for him to approach. Taking a deep breath, he moved forward, careful with each step. He had practiced his greetings in Cerulean, the native language of the royal court, and hoped that his accent would be acceptable. Diplomacy was delicate, especially with someone so young and perceptive. Liara's gaze fell on him, and for a moment, the room felt smaller, as if the two of them were the only ones present. "Welcome to Cerulea," she said, her voice melodic, but carrying a subtle edge, the hint of a challenge hidden beneath politeness. "I trust your journey was comfortable?" She tilted her head slightly, the kind of gesture that humans sometimes missed. But Elias understood it well enough. There was more to her words than simple courtesy. Elias bowed slightly. "Thank you, Princess. The journey was smooth, and your planet is remarkable." He tried to smile, hoping it conveyed respect rather than awe. The truth was, Cerulea was breathtaking. Even the guides seemed to float, rather than walk, moving as if they were part of the very architecture of the place. Liara's eyes narrowed just slightly, though the expression was subtle, almost imperceptible. "Remarkable." "Yes," she said, her tone carrying a light teasing edge. "Some visitors find our customs difficult to understand. Humans, I hear, are clever, but sometimes blunt." Elias blinked, caught off guard. Bluntness was not an insult in human terms. It often meant honesty, but here it sounded like a veiled critique. He felt a flicker of irritation. Not anger, but a quiet reminder that humans valued respect and subtlety. He chose his words carefully. "We do value honesty, Your Highness. And we try to understand, even if your ways are different from ours." His calm tone was meant to show diplomacy, yet it carried an undertone of pride. Humans were resourceful and intelligent, after all. And Elias knew that sometimes subtle confidence spoke louder than 1,000 polite phrases. Liara's lips curved slightly, almost a smile, but there was a sharpness to her gaze. Different indeed. Some say humans rush to judge without seeing the full picture. She paused, then added lightly, "Do you believe that?" Elias hesitated. He knew that one wrong phrase could deepen the misunderstanding. He decided to be honest, careful not to sound defensive. "I believe humans learn by observing and adapting. We notice, we analyze, and we often find solutions where others do not. Perhaps that seems hasty, but it comes from a desire to understand." Her eyes widened just a fraction. Elias had sensed the tiny shift in her expression. It was curiosity mixed with surprise. Few beings appreciated the human approach so readily, he realized. Yet, she quickly regained her composure. "I see," she said, her tone smooth, but carrying an unspoken challenge. "It seems you have thought carefully about this. Many visitors do not." The conversation continued. Small exchanges about culture, language, and customs. Yet, in each word, in every glance, Elias could sense her subtle judgments, and he could feel his own pride, as a human quietly bristling. He admired the alien elegance, the way she commanded attention with little effort. But he also knew that humans had a dignity that demanded recognition. Finally, the meeting concluded, and Elias found himself standing near the entrance, ready to withdraw. Liara gave a polite nod, yet her eyes lingered, almost as if she expected him to say more. But Elias simply inclined his head in return, remaining silent. There was no need for words to prove respect or intelligence. Sometimes quiet composure spoke more than conversation. He turned and departed without another word. Stepping back into the hall, and feeling the soft glow of Cerulea's lights under his feet. Behind him, he sensed her gaze lingering. Perhaps she did not understand his quiet dignity, or perhaps she did. Either way, he had made his point, without confrontation. Humans, he thought, often succeeded not by shouting or boasting, but by quiet confidence and careful observation. As he walked through the crystalline corridors toward his quarters, Elias reflected on the encounter. The princess was sharp, intelligent, and perhaps a little proud, but her curiosity would work in his favor. He knew that this was only the beginning of his time on Cerulea. There would be opportunities to show the value of human thought, empathy, and creativity. And he was ready to prove that humans, though often underestimated, could leave a lasting impression. By the time he reached his room, Elias felt a strange sense of excitement. A challenge had been presented not of strength or force, but of understanding and respect. He smiled to himself. In a universe filled with wonders and intelligence far beyond human norms, perhaps it was humanity's quiet dignity and cleverness that could make them shine. And he, Dr. Elias Hart, intended to show just that. Elias Hart spent his first morning on Cerulea, exploring the crystalline palace gardens. The paths sparkled like liquid glass, lined with plants that glowed faintly in soft colors. The air carried a scent of sweetness, almost like honey mixed with fresh rain. He walked slowly, notebook in hand, jotting observations about plant life, architecture, and the subtle ways the palace staff interacted with each other. Every detail mattered. Humans were good at noticing things others overlooked. And Elias had learned that observation often revealed more than direct conversation. As he moved through the gardens, he noticed figures in the distance moving gracefully along the paths. One of them caught his attention immediately. Princess Liara walked with the elegance of her kind, her hair catching the light in a gentle shimmer. She seemed unaware of him at first, studying a cluster of floating flowers. But then her eyes met his, and she froze slightly, as if unsure whether to approach. Elias gave a polite nod, acknowledging her presence without interrupting. Liara tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. She had spent hours thinking about the human who had left her chamber so silently, who had neither argued nor sought to explain himself. Most visitors to her palace would have protested a perceived insult or tried to charm her with flattery. Elias had done neither. His calm, unshaken demeanor left an impression she could not ignore. Elias continued his walk, pretending not to notice her following at a distance. Humans were cautious by nature, learning to understand before acting. He often found that observing others quietly revealed more about them than direct interaction. Through the mirrored reflections of the crystalline paths, he saw her smile just slightly, an almost imperceptible curve of her lips. It was subtle, but it suggested she found his silence intriguing rather than offensive. He stopped near a fountain of glowing water, letting the light play across the pages of his notebook. Liara finally stepped forward, though she maintained a careful distance. "You enjoy observing," she said softly, almost as a statement, rather than a question. Her voice was melodic, yet carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Elias looked up and returned her gaze calmly. "Observation is important," he replied. "It helps us understand things we do not yet know. Humans often learn more by watching than by speaking." Liara's eyes widened just a little. Few visitors had ever explained their approach so plainly. Most either flattered her or tried to impress with bold statements. But Elias's words were quiet, simple, and confident. She tilted her head. "And what have you learned so far about Cerulea?" He considered her question carefully. "I have noticed respect in the small gestures, harmony in movement, and thoughtfulness in the way your people communicate. The palace staff, for example, seem to anticipate each other's needs without words." His eyes met hers steadily. "Humans do not always do this naturally, but we value it. We notice effort and intelligence, and we adapt." Liara studied him, intrigued by the honesty in his words. Most visitors would have praised the planet or commented on its beauty, but Elias spoke of human understanding, of learning and adaptability. It was a subtle form of pride, not arrogance, but confidence in his species' abilities. She found herself wanting to see more. Over the next few days, Elias continued his explorations. He visited the floating libraries, where knowledge from across the galaxy was stored in luminous spheres that floated gently in the air. He marveled at the technology, but he also observed how the librarians worked together, sharing information without words, their gestures precise and elegant. He quietly made notes, comparing them to human methods of communication and problem-solving. Liara began to appear more often, sometimes passing by corridors where he worked, sometimes joining him in the gardens. Each encounter was brief, yet meaningful. She asked questions not just about his work but about humans in general, how they solved problems, how they learned, and how they built relationships. Elias answered patiently, never boasting, but always highlighting humanity's creativity and empathy. One afternoon, Liara asked him about human inventions. Elias smiled and pulled out a small device from his satchel. "This is a simple translator," he explained. "It allows communication even when languages are very different. It is not perfect, but it shows human ingenuity. We often create tools to bridge gaps, to make understanding easier." "Well, understanding. Well side. To Kaler." She leaned closer, examining the device. "Your people. You value connection above all else, it seems," she observed. Elias nodded. "Connection, understanding, and problem-solving. We are not the strongest or the fastest species, but we find ways to succeed through intelligence and cooperation. We learn from our mistakes and adapt, Sometimes that is our greatest strength. Liara's expression softened. She realized that humans were different from the other species she had met. More unpredictable, perhaps, but also more clever. Where others relied on physical ability or advanced technology alone, humans combined creativity with empathy, observing carefully before acting. It was a quiet strength, one that did not demand attention but left a lasting impression. In the evenings, the palace would glow softly under the twin moons, and Elias often found himself on the balcony, watching the floating rivers and shimmering gardens. Liara sometimes joined him, though she spoke little, letting him reflect and record his observations. He did not mind the silence. Humans often found comfort in quiet, in the ability to think deeply and notice subtle details. One evening, as the moons reflected off the crystal fountains, Liara spoke softly. "You do not fear making mistakes in front of others," she said. "Most visitors worry about offending me or my court, but you seem calm, even when you could be insulted." Elias looked at her, choosing his words carefully. Humans understand that mistakes are part of learning. We do not hide from challenges or insults. We observe, reflect, and adapt. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than words, and understanding is better shown than told. Liara considered this. She had never met anyone who handled potential offense with such quiet dignity. Most beings she knew would argue, demand, or try to prove themselves. Elias had neither protested nor flattered. He had simply maintained his composure, letting his intelligence and respect for others show naturally. By the end of the week, the initial tension between them had shifted. Where there had been misunderstanding, there was now curiosity. Liara began to see humans in a new light, not as a simple species to be amused or underestimated, but as clever, adaptable, and unexpectedly admirable. Elias, in turn, observed Cerulea not just as a planet of beauty and technology, but as a place where understanding and respect could bridge even the widest cultural gaps. Their interactions became a quiet game of observation and learning. Liara asked questions. Elias answered thoughtfully. She tested his patience with subtle challenges, and he met each one with calm intelligence. In this way, they began a dialogue that needed no loud words or grand gestures. It was a mutual exchange of understanding, a dance of insight and curiosity. Elias felt a sense of accomplishment not for himself, but for humanity. Each day, he quietly demonstrated that humans could inspire admiration through intellect, empathy, and adaptability. Liara began to watch him not with judgment, but with interest, her respect for the quiet human growing in ways she had not anticipated. By the time Elias retired to his quarters that night, he felt the satisfaction of small victories. No words of conflict had been exchanged. No pride had been bruised. And yet, in a universe filled with wonders and intelligence far beyond human norms, humans had quietly made their presence felt, not through strength or force, but through understanding, patience, and ingenuity. Elias closed his notebook and looked out at the glowing gardens below. The princess had observed him, questioned him, and learned from him without realizing it. Perhaps, he thought, the greatest strength of humans was that they could leave a lasting impression without ever needing to raise their voice. The day of the planetary symposium arrived, and Elias Hart walked into the grand hall with a sense of quiet determination. The room was enormous, filled with delegates from dozens of star systems, each species more unique than the next. The air shimmered with anticipation as glowing devices floated in the corners, recording discussions and translating languages in real time. Humans were still rare at these gatherings, and Elias knew that many delegates were curious to see what a representative of Earth could contribute. Princess Liara was already present, seated near the center, her posture perfect, her eyes scanning the crowd. She had watched Elias over the past week and had grown increasingly intrigued by the human, who spoke little but observed everything. She expected him to stumble among the complex social rituals and interstellar customs. Instead, he carried himself with calm confidence, a quiet intelligence that seemed to draw attention without demanding it. The symposium began with speeches from various delegates. Each introduced their species' achievements in technology, culture, and science. Some spoke eloquently, others relied on dazzling devices or displays, yet all seemed to measure themselves by grandeur. When it came time for human participation, Elias stepped forward with only his notebook and a small translation device. He did not use elaborate visuals or flashy demonstrations. Humans were often underestimated for their lack of spectacle, yet Elias believed that ingenuity and clarity were stronger than noise. He addressed the assembly in clear, measured tones. Many species solve problems through technology, strength, or complexity, he said. Humans often find solutions through observation, collaboration, and creativity. Our tools are simple, but our ideas can adapt to challenges where force or advanced technology cannot. He presented a problem that the delegates had been discussing for weeks: improving energy distribution on planets with fluctuating solar output. Many species had offered high-tech, expensive solutions, relying on massive devices and complex algorithms. Elias suggested a method inspired by simple human principles: decentralization, small, adaptive nodes that could adjust to changes, and collaboration between local systems. His explanation was straightforward, easy to understand, yet elegant in its simplicity. The hall was silent for a moment. Delegates exchanged glances, not in disdain, but in surprise. Few had expected such a simple, yet effective approach. The human solution required neither immense power nor expensive devices, only clever coordination and careful observation. It was the kind of thinking that humans excelled at, seeing the big picture while adjusting small details. Liara watched closely, leaning forward slightly. She realized that humans' strength lay not in physical prowess or overwhelming technology, but in ingenuity. They could take what seemed like simple tools and apply them in ways that others had overlooked. The calmness with which Elias explained his ideas, the clarity of his reasoning, and his quiet confidence were all traits that made his species remarkable in ways she had not appreciated. As questions came from the audience, Elias answered each with patience and insight. He did not dismiss any suggestion, no matter how impractical it seemed. Instead, he built upon them, demonstrating how human adaptability could integrate ideas from different species into a unified solution. His approach was inclusive, showing respect for the knowledge of others while subtly proving humanity's value. By the end of the symposium session, delegates were nodding in approval, some even taking notes. Elias stepped back, allowing others to present their work. The room had shifted. The earlier skepticism toward humans had been replaced with genuine curiosity. Simple ingenuity had won the respect of even the most advanced species. Afterward, in a quiet corridor away from the main hall, Liara approached Elias. Her expression was thoughtful, tinged with admiration. "You did not need to raise your voice or flaunt your devices," she said softly. "Yet your ideas were understood and valued. Humans, you are clever in ways I did not expect." Elias smiled, though it was modest and unassuming. "Thank you, Princess. Humans often rely on careful thought rather than force or spectacle. We have learned that observing, understanding, and collaborating can solve problems that seem impossible." She considered his words carefully. For days, she had watched him quietly, noting his respect for others, his patience, and his ability to find solutions without dominating any conversation. Unlike many visitors who sought to impress with appearances or status, Elias had relied on the strength of his mind and his calm confidence. It was a lesson she had not expected to learn from a human. Over the next several hours, delegates continued discussions and workshops. Elias moved among the groups, offering insight and assistance where needed. He explained human methods for efficient problem-solving, adaptive teamwork, and collaborative thinking. Delegates began to ask for his advice, impressed by how practical yet innovative his suggestions were. Even those who had initially doubted him came to respect his quiet expertise. Liara observed everything from the side. She realized that human success was not about being the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species. Instead, humans excelled in observation, empathy, creativity, and adaptability. They approached problems differently, often noticing things others missed. Elias embodied these qualities, and she could not help but admire him for it. As the day drew to a close, the symposium organizers held a small ceremony to honor contributions that had had significant impact. Elias was invited forward, not for a speech or an award, but for recognition of the practical ingenuity he had shared. He accepted quietly, nodding to the audience, his humility as notable as his intellect. Liara approached him once more as the crowd dispersed. "You have shown your strength without demanding recognition," she said. "Humans. You are very different from what I expected. I think I understand now why your species can accomplish so much, even when others doubt you." Elias inclined his head respectfully. Humans often learn quietly and act thoughtfully. Strength is not always measured in power. It can be shown in intelligence, empathy, and the ability to solve problems. We do not need to be the loudest or the most visible to leave an impression. She smiled faintly, a genuine warmth shining in her eyes. For the first time, she saw humanity through the lens of admiration, rather than curiosity or skepticism. This human, Elias Hart, had demonstrated the kind of qualities that inspired respect. Patience, intelligence, humility, and cleverness. She realized that humans could indeed leave a mark on the galaxy not through dominance, but through quiet brilliance. That evening, Elias returned to his quarters, exhausted but satisfied. The day had been a success, not through confrontation or showmanship, but through observation, careful thought, and genuine respect for others. He reflected on the events, knowing that he had demonstrated something important not just about himself, but about humanity. Humans could shine in a universe full of wonders, not because of sheer strength or speed, but because of their mind, their heart, and their ability to understand and adapt. Liara, standing at her balcony overlooking the glowing gardens, watched him from afar. She had learned much about humans in just a few days, and her respect for them, and for Elias in particular, had grown. He had turned what could have been an offense into a quiet display of dignity and capability. And in doing so, he had begun to change her perception not just of him, but of humanity as a whole. In the calm of the night, the twin moons reflecting off the palace crystals, Elias's quiet ingenuity had left an impression that words alone could not capture. Humanity had shown that even in the vastness of space, with species far older and more advanced, they could stand out. Not through force, not through arrogance, but through cleverness, patience, and understanding. And that, Elias thought, was a strength worth celebrating. The next morning, Elias Hart awoke to the soft glow of Cerulea's twin suns streaming through the crystal windows of his quarters. The palace gardens below shimmered in shades of blue and green, and floating streams of water reflected the light like ribbons of liquid silver. Today, unlike the previous days, Elias did not plan to wander or observe quietly. He had a series of discussions scheduled with different delegations, and he knew that every interaction was an opportunity to demonstrate human ingenuity, patience, and understanding. As he stepped into the corridor, he noticed Princess Liara waiting nearby, leaning slightly against the glowing wall. Her posture was casual, yet poised, and her eyes held a quiet curiosity that had grown steadily over the past week. Elias had expected she would continue to observe him from a distance, but now she approached directly, her expression calm, almost inviting conversation. "Good morning, Dr. Hart," she said softly. Elias inclined his head with a polite smile. "Good morning, Princess Liara." "Yes, thank you. And you?" "I slept well enough," she replied. She glanced at him thoughtfully, as if weighing the words she wanted to speak. "I have been thinking about your approach, your calmness, the way you observe first and act later. It is very human, is it not?" Elias nodded. "Yes. Humans learn by observing, by understanding, and then acting carefully. We value reflection as much as action. It often helps us avoid mistakes and make better decisions." Liara's gaze drifted toward the floating gardens outside the corridor. "Most species I have met focus on showing strength or on impressing others with their technology. Humans, you are different. You do not demand attention, yet you still leave an impression." Elias smiled faintly. "Sometimes, the quietest actions speak the loudest. Observation, patience, and thoughtful action are often more effective than force or display. Humans have learned that humility and respect are as important as intelligence." Liara considered this, her curiosity growing. Over the past week, she had watched him participate in symposiums, help delegates, and solve problems in ways that were simple yet brilliant. His presence was calm, respectful, and unobtrusive. Yet every action demonstrated competence and ingenuity. She had begun to see him not as a visitor, but as someone who represented the strengths of his species. "Would you show me some of your work today?" she asked finally, her tone cautious but sincere. "I want to understand how humans think, not just in words, but in action." Elias nodded, pleased by her request. "Of course, Princess. I would be happy to share." He led her through the palace corridors to one of the laboratories, a spacious room filled with floating instruments and holographic displays. "Here, humans often combine observation, experimentation, and collaboration to solve problems," he explained. "Our methods are simple, but they are designed to adapt and improve over time." Liara watched as Elias demonstrated a small project. He had brought with him a device that could stabilize energy fluctuations in miniature ecosystems. It was clever in its simplicity. Small, adaptive nodes that adjusted automatically to changes in energy and temperature. To the casual observer, it seemed unremarkable, yet its elegance lay in the way it worked efficiently without complex machinery. "Your solution is simple, yet effective," Liara said, her eyes bright with interest. "Most species would build something large and complicated. Humans, you think differently." Elias smiled. "Humans often succeed by finding solutions that are practical and adaptable. We rely on creativity, observation, and collaboration rather than sheer power or complexity." He demonstrated how each node responded to subtle changes, adjusting automatically without any external command. Liara leaned closer, fascinated by the way the system operated almost like a living organism. "You see," Elias continued, "humans pay attention to patterns and small details. We often notice what others overlook. That is why we can adapt to different environments and solve problems that seem impossible to others." Liara nodded slowly, absorbing every word. She realized that humans' greatest strength was their ability to combine intelligence, creativity, and empathy. They were not the strongest physically, nor the most technologically advanced in every respect, but they excelled in ways that others often underestimated. Watching Elias, she understood that he embodied the very qualities that made humans remarkable. Over the next several hours, they worked together, discussing ideas and testing small experiments. Liara asked questions, sometimes challenging Elias with scenarios that tested his reasoning. He answered each carefully, explaining not only the solutions but the thought processes behind them. She was struck by the clarity and simplicity of his approach. Where other species might have responded with arrogance or complex explanations, he spoke with humility, patience, and logic. As the day progressed, Liara found herself laughing quietly at some of his observations, surprised at the humor hidden in human thinking. She began to see humans not just as a species to study, but as a source of inspiration. Their ingenuity, empathy, and adaptability had a quiet power that could leave a lasting impression without force or aggression. By evening, the two of them were sitting in the floating gardens, watching streams of glowing water drift lazily by. The palace lights reflected in the surface, casting shifting patterns on their faces. Liara spoke softly. "I did not expect to learn so much from a human in so little time. You have shown me patience, intelligence, and respect in ways I did not think possible." Elias looked at her calmly. "That is very kind, Princess. Humans often succeed by understanding others and finding solutions that work for everyone, rather than trying to dominate or impress. We believe that understanding and empathy are as valuable as strength." Liara nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I see that now. Your people, you have a quiet dignity that is unusual among the species I know. You inspire respect without demanding it." Elias smiled faintly. "Humans have learned that respect is earned through action, not words. We do not need to be the loudest or the most impressive to make a difference. Sometimes, quiet observation and thoughtful action are the most powerful tools we have." Liara considered his words in silence, realizing that this human had taught her a lesson not through grand displays or authority, but through calm, intelligence, and respect. She began to understand that humans could achieve remarkable things precisely because they were different from the others she had met. Their strength lay not in appearances or technology alone, but in their mind, their heart, and their ability to adapt and understand. As the twin moons rose over the palace, casting their soft glow on the gardens, Liara turned to Elias with a smile that was more genuine than she had ever allowed herself to show him. "Thank you for showing me this," she said softly. I am beginning to understand humanity better now." Elias inclined his head respectfully. "It has been my pleasure, Princess. Understanding is always the first step toward respect and friendship." In the quiet of the night, as the palace shimmered around them, a new bond began to form. It was not a bond of obligation or ceremony, but of mutual respect, curiosity, and understanding. Liara had learned to see the value of quiet strength and cleverness, and Elias had shown that humans could leave a lasting impression without force, arrogance, or conflict. For both of them, it was a beginning of a relationship built on observation, intellect, and empathy. Humans, Elias thought, often succeeded not by dominating others, but by inspiring them through their character and intelligence. And Princess Liara, watching the glowing gardens with him, was beginning to see humanity as a species worthy of admiration. The day of departure arrived quietly on Cerulean. The twin suns rose slowly, casting long, golden reflections across the crystal corridors of the palace. Elias' heart packed the last of his belongings into his satchel, carefully organizing notebooks, translation devices, and the small gifts he had brought for the palace staff. Each item had been chosen with thought, a symbol of human respect and appreciation. Today, he would leave Cerulean, but the lessons, impressions, and connections he had made would linger far longer. Princess Liara appeared at the balcony overlooking the landing platform. She had spent the night thinking, reflecting on the past week, and the human who had quietly transformed her understanding of his species. Elias had shown her the subtle power of patience, creativity, and empathy. Unlike other visitors who had tried to impress her with status, skill, or flamboyance, Elias had simply been himself thoughtful, observant, and clever. Elias emerged from the palace corridors and saw her waiting. He approached with calm dignity, aware of the weight of the moment. Most beings would have made speeches, insisted on farewells, or tried to impress once more before leaving. But Elias understood that human strength often lay in quiet presence, in the ability to leave an impression without force or ceremony. "Good morning, Princess Liara," he said politely, inclining his head. "It has been an honor to visit your world." Liara smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "And it has been a pleasure to have you here, Dr. Hart," she replied softly. "I have learned more from your actions than I ever expected. Humans, you are clever and thoughtful, in ways I had not fully understood before." Elias's smile was modest. "Thank you, Princess. Humans often rely on observation and understanding. We adapt, we reflect, and we find solutions that work for everyone, not just ourselves. I hope I have demonstrated that well during my stay." Liara stepped closer, holding a small crystalline object in her hands. "I want you to have this," she said, offering it to him. "It is a token of trust and friendship from my family. It represents our connection and my respect for your people. I hope it will remind you of Cerulea and of the lessons we have shared." End quote. Elias accepted the gift with care, examining its delicate structure. The crystal shimmered with light from within, reflecting the colors of the twin suns. "Thank you, Princess," he said quietly. "I will treasure it. It is a symbol of understanding, and that is the most important gift of all." Liara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I must admit," she continued, "when we first met, I thought your silence and calmness were unusual. I did not understand why you did not respond to my words in the way most humans would. But now, I see that your quiet demeanor was a lesson in itself. Sometimes, observing and reflecting speaks louder than any argument or display." Elias inclined his head. "Humans often act with patience and thoughtfulness. We value understanding and respect. That is why I chose to act as I did. Words are not always necessary when actions convey meaning." They walked together toward the landing platform, the crystalline paths glowing under their feet. Staff members and delegates paused to watch, curious about the human who had left such a lasting impression on the young princess. Many had witnessed the subtle exchange of respect and understanding between them, and whispers of admiration for humans spread quietly through the palace halls. As Elias reached the shuttle, he paused and turned back to Liara. "I hope that you will continue to share your wisdom and curiosity with others," he said. "The galaxy has much to learn, and humans are always eager to collaborate and understand. We value friendship and knowledge above all else." Liara smiled, her eyes reflecting both the light of the suns and a newfound respect for the human standing before her. "I will remember that, Dr. Hart. You have taught me that strength is not always measured in power, and that intelligence, creativity, and empathy can leave an impact stronger than any weapon or machine. Humans, you have a quiet brilliance that I will not forget." Elias nodded, satisfied that his message had been understood. "It has been my honor, Princess. May your world continue to thrive and inspire all who visit it." The shuttle doors closed, and Elias settled into his seat. He looked out through the transparent canopy, watching the palace and gardens shrink into the distance. The crystal towers reflected the sun's light, and the floating rivers shimmered like ribbons of silver. He felt a sense of accomplishment, not for himself, but for humanity. In a universe full of powerful and technologically advanced species, humans had quietly demonstrated their worth. They could inspire, teach, and connect through intelligence, creativity, and empathy. Liara remained on the balcony until the shuttle rose into the sky, her eyes following the human who had taught her so much. She held the small crystal tightly, a reminder of the lessons learned, of respect earned, and of the quiet power of observation and understanding. She realized that humans could leave lasting impressions not through force, status, or spectacle, but through their character and ingenuity. Elias had embodied that perfectly. As the shuttle ascended into the upper atmosphere, Elias reflected on his time on Cerealia. He had come as a visitor, curious to learn and to share knowledge, but he left knowing that humanity had been recognized, not for arrogance or dominance, but for its quiet brilliance. He had shown that humans could adapt, solve problems creatively, and inspire respect through intellect and empathy. The stars stretched out before him, vast and endless, yet Elias felt confident that humanity had a place among them. A small, clever, observant species, capable of remarkable accomplishments when it relied on intelligence, collaboration, and understanding. And Princess Liara, watching him from the palace below, had become an unexpected witness to this truth. The shuttle carried Elias through the sky, past clouds that glowed with the light of the suns, and into the darkness of space. The crystal towers of Cerulia faded into the distance, but the memory of the planet, its beauty, and its people remained vivid. He had made connections, earned respect, and demonstrated the quiet power of humanity. And that, he thought, was more important than any award or recognition. In the palace, Liara finally returned indoors, holding the crystal gift close. She smiled softly, knowing that she had been given a glimpse of human greatness, not in displays of force or technology, but in calm intelligence, observation, and empathy. Elias had left without fanfare, yet his presence had changed her perception, and she would carry the lesson forward, sharing it with others. As the shuttle continued its journey into the stars, Elias felt a quiet satisfaction. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was small, but it was clever, adaptable, and capable of leaving lasting impressions through respect, creativity, and intelligence. He thought of the many worlds still to explore, the challenges to solve, and the friendships to build. And he smiled, knowing that humans had once again shown that quiet dignity and ingenuity could shine even in the most extraordinary places. The twin suns of Cerulia faded behind him, but the lessons learned, the respect earned, and the friendships formed would endure. Humanity, Elias knew, had proven itself once again not with loud proclamations or forceful demonstrations, but with intelligence, patience, and heart. And somewhere on a glowing planet far below, a young alien princess would remember the human who turned a small offense into a lasting lesson of admiration, understanding, and respect.